Thank you for joining us, Gianluca Chacra, the CEO and managing partner at Front Row Film Entertainment, and Nasri Atallah, the co-founder and head of development at Last Floor Productions. Gianluca, I'm going to start with you, and I want to ask you about the streaming services. Where do you see them in the future, in the next 5 years? And do you believe that they may be overtaking the cinemas?
They might. They really might. It's about how the exhibitors are probably going to play it. Lately, exhibitors have been playing, your usual films, and they've been betting they've been going for the safe bets. So, having just blockbusters out there and kind of downplaying films that are less than any tentpole title, just to secure the fast buck. And honestly speaking, as a distributor, we don't always have the biggest films. We do distribute good films, critically acclaimed films, which obviously need the push. They need work. They need efforts to be promoted. And then when it comes to exhibition, especially in the region, they all bet on the biggest films. If you see like all the stuff that's always promoted in theaters are, your usual films. So you always have your Marvels, you always have your Disney titles, but never ever given. They don't ever give the chance to films that are beneath that. And on the long run, obviously, that's really going to hurt. The people that have been taking that kind of space have been streamers, and obviously by default, slowly, because it's going to be the majority of these films. So slowly, the streamers have been gaining mileage on that. We have warned cinemas many times throughout the years. They just didn't listen, and now, with COVID, they just, all of this has speeded up the whole shift between cinema and the streaming services, and that's the result now. So I think there's a lot of work to be done now, especially now that most of, for 5 months, people have been at home for, they've been at home for 5 months, and people now are fully aware of what a streaming service can offer. So yeah.
And do you think the streamers are also playing a role in the area here in the MENA region? And how big of a role is it?
Look, when it comes to the global streamers, it's a massive role. It really is. It's a massive role, especially when it comes to Western or international kind of cinema and introducing cinema from more developed kind of regions. In the Middle East, especially now, it has gained a lot of mileage. So I'm pretty sure that, your Amazon Primes and your Netflixes and, these kind of platforms, even Apple, they've gained a lot of mileage, especially under COVID. Then you have the local platforms. Also, they probably gained a lot of mileage. There is kind of a difficulty adapting to the new era, mainly because the biggest kind of platforms are still run by your big TV stations, and therefore the mindset is still of a TV station. So they're a bit slower than the global platforms in moving and sort of, making a bold statement and so on. Whereas, they still want to launch their titles on free TV first, and then, and then if it's like something that's a bit, like they wouldn't dare to premiere something massive on a local platform. That's the problem, and I think it's a mindset. But eventually that'll change, and I think, that's the right time to change if they really want to make a difference. But, the advantage sorry if I'm cutting you, the advantage on the local platform is that because they're connected to, big TV stations, whereas it's pay or free TVs, with the local language product, which is key to an SVOD platform. So that's the advantage they have. It's about how they play it.
Yeah. I'm gonna go to Nasri. Nasri, I want to ask you. I mean, in your case, it was different. You did work on a project, but do you think the COVID crisis did it hinder the film industry or maybe some other projects of yours? And if not, was it good in any way for the industry? If not,
I think it's hard to say COVID was good for anything. It's hard to say the word good and COVID like in the same sentence. But I think, I mean, look, like Gianluca was saying, like I think it accelerates a lot of stuff. So I think stuff that was going to happen in 5 years just happened like much quicker. Trends that have been on the horizon are suddenly like right in front of us. Yeah, for us it was. So we've been taught. So we, to like give some context, like we actually worked with Shahid during lockdown on a production which was entirely conceived, commissioned, shot, written, broadcast, everything during lockdown. So it was quite a crazy experience. It's a Shahid original. And it's interesting, Gianluca, because it's actually one of those, I think, where they are taking, it's digital first, so it didn't stream on, it didn't air.
I know, but what you're talking about is probably like more experimental, which is cool.
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
A lot of credit to that. No, what I'm talking about is something like a bigger kind of experience where it's like, okay, listen, I'm premiering.
Yeah.
The big title, you know.
Yeah, for sure.
But no, I mean, I love that. The experimental stuff is much needed in the region, and yeah.
Yeah, I mean, this was experimental, like end to end, from the way it was built to, and I think as well the fact that, I mean, we'd already started a conversation with Chad about something else that got postponed by COVID. So we already had that connection there, and we'd been to the launch in February, the relaunch. And so we'd seen kind of that, you know, they had someone who had come over from Hulu, who I think has since like moved on to HBO Max recently.
Oh yeah, totally.
Yeah. And like it did feel like being in that room, it felt like, yeah, like this is the locals, the regional streamers are kind of have caught up to some extent to the global streamers. And in terms of like I think definitely like COVID had an impact on, you know, everyone's timelines, everyone's finances, everyone's, you know, but honestly, like we came up with the idea for this show out of pure panic. Like we saw everything stop to come to a halt, and we had just started our company like at the beginning of the year, essentially. And so we just said, we have to find a solution. Like we have to shoot in people's homes. Everyone can shoot themselves. So it ended up being like we ended up shooting in Jeddah and Beirut, and a bit in London and a bit in Abu Dhabi. And people were just like using GoPros, and it was very
creative and
what's it called? Like problem solving approach.
No, you get that a lot now.
Nasri, could you tell me a bit how quickly did they commission the project? Like how much interest did they show? Do you think that do they really want to compete with the big streamers?
Yeah, look, I mean, I remember this very vividly, like April 7th, I sent a voice note to my two partners who are in Beirut, and we're all like stuck in our own, you know, wherever we live. So I was stuck in London, stuck in Beirut, and I told them we have to come up with an idea. We came up with an idea pretty quickly, sent it to Ali Ramlouche at Shahid, who's the head of short originals. He's like, this is great timing because we're thinking about something similar. Let's build it together. And it just went like at an extremely quick pace because so it's a Shahid original. So obviously like we had their support. They were looking at similar ideas and we just built this together. And obviously like having their backing helped us secure like a big name like Qusay Khawli, who's in the series. And we secured like other talent, etc. So it was like a really quick turnaround, like from deciding we wanted to do we decided to come up with an idea to the 10 episodes of streamed. It was 3 months. So, I mean, I wouldn't.
How long is each episode?
They're 10-minute episodes. So we're in the short category, but I mean, I wouldn't recommend. It's a crazy, like it was a bit of a crazy project. Like it was a lot of work. It was, you know, obviously the show deals with isolation and connection, and we were all working on it isolated, and it was intense. But I think like we're lucky that there's that kind of outlet, you know, and I think Netflix did something with, you know, like the homemade, like the series.
Yeah, they did.
Like
so it's launching pretty soon, right?
It launched. I watched a couple.
Oh, it did? Okay, I haven't
Yeah,
seen it.
yeah.
Okay. Yeah,
It's
no, I'm
just
sure a lot of these kind of projects are going to pop up for sure.
yeah.
Yeah.
It's also
Yeah.
changed, I think, what audiences kind of expect. I don't know, like I think we're obviously going to have like the normal types of productions, but I think it
Yeah,
also
yeah,
widens the scope for what's
yeah.
doable.
And it also came at an interesting time where everyone was experiencing the same thing, so they wanted to watch something that they can relate to as well.
Hmm.
Yeah, yeah, we were
Yeah,
keen,
yeah, I know.
like we were keen to make sure the story like survives beyond COVID. That like
Yeah,
it's a story that's about isolation, but that's shot with the kind of constraints that we had because of the lockdown. But
yeah,
that it should be like a solid story before being a trend story, so that it has years ahead of it, like in the back catalog as well, like for the
Yeah.
streamer, like that's how
yeah,
we
yeah.
think as well. So yeah.
Oh,
Gianluca, I want to ask you, we saw recently Netflix acquiring a big number of movies from the MENA region.
yeah.
Is it just a show of expanding their library? Do they just want to expand their library, or is it
No, it's more.
a show of interest for local and regional stories?
No, look, I mean, they see a lot of potential in the Middle East. We're a distribution company to start with, and when we started sort of aggregating for other partners in the region, and with them we kind of discussed kind of exporting Middle Eastern cinema. So we try to focus on the best filmmakers in the region, new or more contemporary kind of filmmakers, and obviously the classics like your Yusuf Shaheens and Yusri Nasrallah, these kind of guys. And no, they actually really believe that there is a kind of cinema that comes out of the Middle East that could be exported. So we did, depending on the title, kind of worldwide deals on some of the films, and came up with a curated selection, together, and that's what we did. Yes, they, at the end of the day, like if you think about it, just in the region alone, like you have over 300, like the population in the Middle East is 350 million, and obviously they want to gain Middle Eastern audiences when it comes to your, local platforms and even like your TV channels. The thing is that they never really curated and cared about these filmmakers. They really didn't, so you want to have like a platform that's actually kind of promoting this and trying to inspire even like the new kind of talent, because at the end of the day, you do want to develop a new kind of talent and show the real quality cinema that's out there. So yeah, in this case, they're definitely interested in doing that. They definitely want to expose the good Middle Eastern cinema on a worldwide basis and eventually expand from there. Look, the good thing about these platforms and the ones that are going to come, because it's not just your Netflix and your Amazons that are in the region, but now Apple is being a bit more aggressive. Peacock, which is a universal.
Disney is being
And
very
Disney is
aggressive.
definitely, yeah, no, absolutely. But you also have like, Peacock, Hulu, and so on. Like these guys have all global ambitions, and down the line, when it comes to the Middle East, you're going to need to grow your subscription base. You are going to need local, films, local product, whether it's feature films, whether it's TV series, whether it's reality,
Yeah.
you're going to need that, which means there's going to be a lot more competition, which means that for producers or production companies, that's, a message from God. It's like, okay, finally, we're not depending on your 2-3 TV stations that would eventually finance films or like distributors that, have the balls to at the end say, hey, you know what, I'll give you money, just do the film, I'll distribute it for you, and so on. Like there would be a lot more opportunity, and then it would be, a lot more talent in the region. If you think about it, the Middle East depends on these 5, 6, 7 names which are dependable, and then that's it. So people invest in these same exact people, and there's no experimentation. So you wouldn't have any more like your Nasri that's like, okay, finally we did a project, these guys backed it 2-3 years ago, that would have never been there. Like it would have been like really hard, right? I mean,
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure, you know. So now it's like it's about that. It's about even like, you know, for these platforms finding, you know, a niche or you know, and then building on that.
Well,
And you know,
you
now's the
all
right time.
you also have the filmmakers, or I want also to ask Nasri on this. So you have the filmmakers who would say, no, I want to make my movie for cinemas rather than for a streaming platform. Nasri, like for you, if you want to make a movie, would you rather do it for cinemas or for a streaming platform? And how would you have this conversation with a filmmaker? Because a lot of filmmakers, like, there's this back and forth, like, I want to put my movie on a big screen, but then again, on a streaming platform, it's so much easier to distribute.
I think, I kind of think that's like a dead debate. Like I know people are still having this debate, but to me, it feels like what's it called? Like flogging a dead horse. Like there's no,
Yeah.
it's not a debate anymore, because I think one of the problems we have in the region is we have like auteur filmmaking on one side and like hyper commercial, you know, like down market filmmaking on the other, and kind of this massive gap in the middle, whether it's TV or cinema, that no one's really capitalizing on, which is where I would say, I'm not going to speak for the global industry, but in the US or UK, like that's where most filmmaking and TV making is happening, is somewhere in the middle between auteur and like, you know, massively commercial stuff. And I think we're missing an opportunity by not focusing on that huge tranche in the middle. And like I would say, like I'm completely like platform agnostic, I'm medium agnostic. I think it has to make sense. You know, some things, you know, I mean, if Alfonso Cuarón's putting Roma out on Netflix, like I think you're fine. You know, everyone should be fine with putting out their film on streaming. I do understand. I mean, and then there's like in the US, I guess, because there's like the whole awards contention thing. So to contend for awards, you have to play in a certain number of cinemas for a certain number of weeks. We maybe don't have that in the region, so maybe it is more kind of. But I mean, if you can negotiate with your streamer that, you know, you want a short run.
I'm a distributor, and we've had a lot of, you know, when it comes to local talent, it's very much different than you know, the US. Like unless like you're, you know, like you justly said, you know, you have an Alfonso Cuarón, but at the same time you also have a Martin Scorsese that produced a film for Netflix and directed a film for Netflix. So yes, obviously it played for 2-3 weeks in theaters, and that's it, just to sort of, you know, access the Academy. But other than that, when it comes to the region, you still have this myth of cinema. You still do. You know, it's like, oh, but I want my film to be played on screens. And many times as a distributor, you know, we found ourselves kind of, you know, suggesting to the filmmakers, it's like, okay, are you, you know, do you want to reach more audience, or do you just, is it an ego thing that, yes, I'm in theaters? Because you might get like maybe 100 people going to watch your film in theaters, whereas if you premiere it on TV or on VOD or now like on streaming, you're probably going to have hundreds of thousands of people that are probably going to watch this. And it's now, again, like with, you know, the bigger kind of global platform names, that thing is changing. It's completely changing, you know, even like because it's always been so hard to finance films, but now that you're going to have like all of these global platforms, and as a result of that, even like, you know, local platforms, it's going to be easier to, you know, if you have like an original idea, I think like you're going to be able to finance that in no time. It really is that. And it's about, you know, the talent and the idea. Now it's that.
I just want to quickly comment on the fact that you guys are saying that some filmmakers have this still this debate. I think for the region here, it's a bit of a struggle for filmmakers to make their movies, to get them to produce and complete them. So this is maybe why they want them to play in theaters, because it's like their baby.
It doesn't necessarily, yeah, but it doesn't necessarily mean that your return on investment is going to come, because most of look, the thing about the difference between the Middle East and probably Europe and the US and so on is that most of the films in the Middle East are financed as, it's private equity. you know, you don't have government supporting that, you know. Yeah, you might have your Doha fund and your Abu Dhabi fund and whatever, like you're going to access some sort of money, but it's never like, you know, the government supporting the filmmakers. It's never that, you know. So, so most of the time it's like you're literally begging for money for, you know, investors to you know, to support your film. Whereas like in Europe mainly, it's like you don't have that problem. You know, it's you got to pass like certain criterias, and then you might access a fund, and like the, you know, BFI or even in France and so on. So over here, it's like it's equity, and you know, like and that's why like filmmakers kind of struggle over here. It's that.
Plus, I think, like, to add to that, there's a free, like, you know, when you're trying to build, let's say, I mean, I'm going to talk about a Lebanese film just from like stuff I've witnessed. I haven't worked on anything that's like in this model, but you often get like, let's say you get money from France. There's also like story kind of restrictions around that, right? So like France is giving you the CNC or whatever is going to give you money to make a film that's a bit miserable and a bit about these subjects that they think they want to throw money towards. Sorry, I mean, I don't want to generalize.
No, it's true. No, but it's true. It's
but,
true.
You know, but whereas like there's this new freedom, like, because let's say you're doing something hype,
100%.
Like Last Floor Productions focuses on genre, right? So we want to do crime, horror, thriller. This is a Shek for Shahid is a psychological thriller. And there's just no room for that in filmmaking if you're like asking for money from France or from wherever for a Lebanese.
Because they want the cinema verité and like
they're not interested in
that kind of stuff.
So if you get a Netflix on board, not only are you like allowed to dabble in genre, you're also allowed to see yourself as part of a global marketplace. So you're not only talking to the regional market and like hoping a few festivals let you show, you know.
No, you're
like,
right.
You're suddenly like globally relevant, like, you know, subtitles are, I mean, you just have to see Parasite, you know, or anything, you know, all the Spanish language stuff you can watch.
100.
Like language is a non-issue. And
so it's no longer a barrier. It's no longer a barrier. You're right.
Yeah.
You know, you've had like, Casa del Papel, or you had like, you know, your Narcos and Gomorrah and Subura, like all of these shows, they kind of broke that barrier. And now it's like, you know, you either have something really good and people will watch it or not, you know, it's that.
Gianluca, I want to ask you, you just told me before that you started your own production company. I don't know if that's still under wraps or if you can talk about it a bit.
No, it's still, no, we announced it last May in Cannes. So because of how the business is changing, are you guys still there?
Yeah.
Guys? Okay. So because of how, like, again, like we Front Row starts as a you know, it started off with distribution, and it's been doing that for the past 16 years. And because of how we saw the business change and, you know, being a distributor, we kind of get, you know, what works and what doesn't in the region. And at the same time, being a film buff, you know, I would love to see certain things on screen in the Middle East, which have never been done, you know. So we thought it was the right time to sort of launch a production company. We launched it with an international sales company called Rocket Science. We joint ventured and we started this production company called Yalla Yalla. Now, in order to start really fast, and I know it's the cheesiest name, but it's catchy, and we kind of like it.
And it works for the region. It works.
Yeah, totally.
It's the name of a very good film.
Yes, exactly, the Swedish one. Yeah. So we decided to launch that, and in order to start fast, like, you know, we had to get the ball rolling. We bought 2 remake rights. So the first film that we acquired, or the remake Arabic language remake rights, was an Italian film called Perfect Strangers, which hopefully it'll start shooting in October. It was supposed to start shooting in May, then COVID happened. So that's one, and then we bought the remake rights of Intouchable, which that will be an Egyptian Saudi co-production, whereas like Perfect Strangers will be a Lebanese Egyptian co-production. So we wanted to start that just again, like to get the ball rolling. And then we, while looking for more original stuff, we're also working on a few TV series. So in parallel to that, yes, we're having conversations with your local, TV stations and shaheds and so on, but also like with global platforms. And the interest is there, the fact that we kind of get what works and what doesn't in the region helps a lot. And we kind of get the politics and the business aspect of it all. But at the same time, we're here also to push the envelope. Now that you have like all these platforms that like literally don't give a damn of censorship, you could just go all out, and that's an advantage. It really is, which I honestly believe it's good in the sense that even like your local guys would have to kind of change their standards at some point.
I also think we have the advantage of seeing like what happened in, let's say, like the Asian market or the Latin American market. Like when the global players came in, like we saw the kind of leap from what was happening on TV in Colombia to like what happened with like all these production companies setting up to work on Narcos, and then what came in terms of originals. Like it kind of created these ecosystems.
Yeah.
And I think we haven't really thought in terms of ecosystems in the region. Like, I mean, like I would love, Lebanon obviously is going through like an incredibly difficult time. Yeah. It's hard to dream at a time like this. But like, I was happy that on this production, like we were able to employ 25 people in Lebanon in the middle of a crisis. And because we're a UK-based company, like we were able to actually function outside of the system of like all the mess that's happening in Lebanon. And like, if we just, the thing these platforms give us is a global outlook. So we can stop looking at, anything we make can be a global success. And so that mindset.
I know, but at the same time, like what a lot of people have always, like when it comes to the Middle East, a lot of, or, the ones that have like ambitions, and it's good to have ambitions, but you also have to be kind of smart. A lot of the films that have been kind of financed in the past, like they always had this idea of like, I'm going to make it. And, it's like, fuck the Middle East. It's more like, we want to make it outside. We want to release in the US, and we want to release in Europe, and. They always kind of like, that's why a lot of the time, the bigger kind of productions, especially coming out of the Gulf, in terms of budgets, they were like really high, expecting to be distributed, outside of the Middle East. Whereas to me, that's always been like a non-starter. It's like, be a success locally meaning in your country. The problem in the Middle East is that films are kind of labeled. So you have the Hollywood of the Middle East, which is Egypt, right? That's the Hollywood of the Middle East. That's the universal dialogue or dialect in the Middle East versus, a Lebanese film, which starts with a kind of a handicap. It's like the accent is not accessible to most of the Gulf, for example. So you have like Egypt, which is the Hollywood of the Middle East, and you have kind of like Lebanon, which depending on the filmmaker, it kind of works, but again, the results achieved in Lebanon are probably like outside of Lebanon, you get like 10% of the results achieved in Lebanon. Well, so it's really small. And then, so just imagine if you have a film out of the UAE or a film out of Kuwait and so on, like it's segregated as a region. So, you start off with, if you want to make a film, like, make it succeed in your own country and then expand. And if it makes it out of the Middle East, great. And then if it makes it outside of the Middle East, even greater. That was the mindset that people never thought of, unfortunately.
Well, I want to talk with Nasri a bit about this, especially like in terms of the stories. Like, what are some of the stories and content that the streamers are looking for? Because we still see like a small number of films or TV shows made for these big streamers. And I'm sure they want some stories that can resonate with and have a global story, and that they can speak to everyone. Could you tell me a bit about this?
I mean, I think I think number one is like it has to be a good story, like whatever the genre, whatever. Like that's always the basis. Like sometimes we get like caught up in like market dynamics and stuff, and I think at the end it just has to be like well written. But I mean, look, we've been talking to some streamers as well, like global streamers. Like there's definitely interest in crime. I mean, we also like kind of started our company with a desire to make the shows that we'd love to see in Arabic, and I completely agree with Gianluca. Like they have to work in the region first. Like I don't want to make an Arabic show that everyone in the Arab world is going like, this doesn't make sense. Like I don't understand what this is about. Like that's it'll feel insincere here, or well, I mean London. So it'll feel insincere in the Middle East, and it'll also feel insincere globally, I think. So
for sure.
But I definitely think there's an appetite for crime, and you just have to look at what they've been doing, like region by region. So you look at Netflix, like they have what's it called, Delhi Crime, which is like a really good kind of like noirish. You know, so I think there's the same appetite for the same genres that have been kind of doing well for them globally. Like they want those from every region. So if we can give them a good like noir story, and I think of films like the Nile Hilton incident or something like that.
Exactly. You know, that was never distributed here in the region.
I know.
Never.
And it's such a good film.
It's so good. Yeah.
You know, it's a perfect example of what can come out. And I think it was I think because a lot of the actors, Swedish, it was like Swedish co-production,
German, whatever, yeah.
So I think there's, and like even like in terms of we're thinking, like because we're also like location agnostics, like I want to do stories about, you know, Arabs in Europe, Arabs in Latin America. That 100%. Also opens up co-production opportunities. So like if you're doing a story about Arabs in Norway,
no, exactly. That's what I was trying to say before. The thing is that, you know, you have all of your TV stations that have always, you know, focused on one model and one season, in the sense it's all about Ramadan, right? Yeah. So they all want like the same formulaic, work. And it's like, you know, that worked last year, let's do the same this year and let's replicate. And that's why you don't really have a lot of variety. And that's why, you know, I think like the mass has always been used to one type of show or one type of film in general, that I don't know any better. I literally don't know any better.
But it's also like, you know, the way streaming made in the US or in the UK, like it made the fall season irrelevant, because it used to be like you wait until September to get all the good shows.
100%.
Now, you know, if you're a streamer, you have to have something interesting out every week.
All the time. Yeah, right. No, exactly. Like over here, like 80% of the shows are for Ramadan. All of them. You know, so you're like, And you know, whereas now it's like again, like with your global streamers, like they give you a chance to like experiment and come up with like, you know, new kind of things, which, you know, at the beginning, the way I see it at least is, you're gonna get a lot of attention, meaning a lot of shit from the audience. But we're not this and that and that and that. But eventually, like, people are gonna get used to it. And you know, again, like, you know, people have been accessing, you know, shows from different parts of the world. And I think, like, you know, even in the Middle East, people are gonna get a lot more demanding. You know, you can't see your typical, you know, Ramadan drama over and over and over again. And I honestly think, like, if someone has, you know, the balls to come up with something like, you know, different, I think people will start appreciating that, honestly, you know, as long as it's culturally appropriate and not having, you know, a show just like a, you know, Jim, which was released, you know, like on Netflix, which was written by foreigners and then eventually executed by Middle Eastern filmmakers. You know, that was a mistake. But again, it's like, you know, people didn't know that at the time. You know, they did a show, but, you know, lesson learned. And now it's like a thing, or it's like, okay, if I have to write a show, or, you know, it has to be culturally relevant for the region. So that's really important. And then you could be as daring as possible.
And what's good with Netflix is that they quickly commission a show into a second season if they see it working, or they quickly cancel it if it's not. So they want to keep it moving and producing as quick as they can.
But at the same time, like, you have like these platforms that kind of give a chance for, you know, the real talent will show, and he will keep on making, you know, film and or TV series. the problem in the region is that you don't have good screenwriters. I mean, that's one of the reasons why, and it's rare to find like a really good, screenwriter. And that's one of the main reasons why we bet at the beginning with remake rights. And trust me, even finding writers for a remake was insane. Like, it was so hard. You know, I'm like, guys, like, you're not reinventing the wheel. And it was hard, like, really, but, hopefully slowly things are going to change.
Gianluca, I wanna quickly ask you, do you think that there is a global streamer that might set base in the region and start commissioning, besides Netflix, I mean, start commissioning shows and movies?
I mean, I think down the line, well, Netflix still doesn't have a base here, but they probably will, and I hope they will, honestly. And I hope every single global the thing is, like, once the region kind of proves itself being big, and you're going to have to set up an office over here, by hook or crook. It's like it's you have no choice, and it's going to happen. I really think so. So, and these kind of regions are big enough to justify a local office. So yes, it's definitely going to happen. It's going to take some time, and I don't think a lot of time, just because how fast this region is growing. So it is definitely going to happen. If you think about it, they set up offices in Italy, in France, and so on. And if you think about Egypt alone, Italy has like 60 million in terms of population, and that's a big market. Versus Egypt, you don't have the same purchasing power, but probably, Egypt is 100 million in terms of the population. But then again, you have Saudi, which is 35 or 40 million people. Then combined, it's 350 million people, the Middle East. So yeah, they better open an office over here. It's massive, so yeah, they see the potential, and I'm pretty sure it's going to happen,
Hopefully.
That.
Nasri, I want to ask you if you'd like to add something before we run out of time.
No, I'm really happy. Thanks for this conversation. Like, I think it's an ongoing conversation.
Yeah.
This is never resolved. I think I want to talk to Gianluca after this call.
Yeah.
Have a chat.
If you could give him all my contacts, I'm more than happy.
Yeah, there you go.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Thanks, Emilio. Thanks for hosting this.
Yeah, I would like to thank you both and wish you a lovely evening.
It was fun. Thank you. Thank you, man.
Goodbye.
Take care.
Bye.